All right. Well, good afternoon and welcome to today's Illuminated conversation. We're excited to be here as we talk about the transition as we step into fall, the back to school season, and just some of the stressors that can really come up and impact us in that season as well. So we are the Lumen Group. And I'm just noticing some tech challenges behind the scenes. But as I mentioned, we're excited to be here and have this conversation around really the impacts of stress in the workplace, and knowing that as much as we can as leaders, as individual contributors, step into work and try to have that barrier to our personal lives and the things that are coming up. We know that that's not always the case, even with our best intentions. But we here at the Lumen Group believe that these Illuminated conversations are really a way that we can share insights, what we're learning and seeing and hearing from our clients, even in our own personal experience, to really share tips and strategies that everyone can use in the workplace. And that directly supports our mission here at the Lumen Group, which is to really reshape and co-create the way we think about the workplace, how we can disrupt and change patterns of communication or engagement in our environments that just aren't supportive to our productivity, our engagement, and ultimately that satisfaction. So I'm Dr. Emily Hedberg, a senior consultant here with the Lumen Group. Today we're joined by Dr. Megan Broger, our president and founder, and Donnie Hobbs, another senior consultant on the team. So as we get started and dive into this, we also want to share just a little bit about our approach and how that might be different from other, firms that do similar team and leadership development work. And what we believe that the effectiveness of us as professionals, as leaders, really comes down to our ability to be regulated from a nervous system perspective. So we integrate psychology, neurology, and biology for people to understand how we can better support, step into, and navigate the work world in a bit of a different way. And when we can operate from that place of being grounded or centered, what that allows us to do is be even more effective in how we're communicating with people, how we're connecting with them, and that ultimately contributes to our workplace climate. And we know in these seasons of transition, change, when we're navigating newness, while that can be really fun and exciting, we can also recognize that that can also help or support us in being out of range, or maybe cause us to be out of range. So we're going to talk today about ways or strategies that we can really come back to that center and navigate this season with clarity and confidence, so that we can not only be our best selves at work, but outside of work. So as we get started with that and through these illuminated conversations, we always like to start with a skill. So today, Donnie's going to lead us through a bit of an exercise to allow us to really reshift and take a step in the right direction.
Thanks, Emily. Yeah, so I think that we're coming in around midday for a lot of folks. And this is kind of the time when we start to come off of that morning rush of productivity, and we might start to come down. We're already probably holding quite a bit. A lot has happened today already. And so what I'd like you to do, if you're up for it, is just to what we call pull over. Just take a moment and just notice everything that you're holding, and just pull over and just set that down just for a moment. And what I'd like you or invite you to do is just notice the pace that you were moving prior to stepping into this webinar, this conversation. Notice all the things you're holding, and just notice what it feels like just to slow down and pull over. And then I would invite you just to take a moment and notice how you're breathing. Sometimes our breath becomes a bit shallow as we become busy or focused on a task or multiple tasks, juggling things. And whatever you notice about how you're breathing right now, just go ahead and lengthen your inhale and slow your exhale. And just notice how that feels. Even just that one change. And maybe take another slow, deep inhale. And just sit here as you pull over and notice what it's like to slow down just a little bit and recenter. Emily mentioned coming back to center. Stay here for another minute or so, or continue to stay pulled over and continue to breathe slowly and intentionally as we move through our conversation.
Thank you so much, Donnie. That's such a powerful example, but also a really simple practice, and just the power of coming back to our breath is, as silly as that sounds, or as simple as that sounds, how transformative that can really be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It makes me think too of this topic as we're navigating some of these seasons of change and transition, how, doing that throughout the course of the day can really have a lot of tangible benefits. So as we step into this season, and I know here in Minnesota, we're, back in the swing of the school rhythm and routine. But as we've been talking even internally, just about how that transition can create some changes in our workplace dynamics, our schedules, our commitments. And so today we really wanted to spend some time talking about that. Recently, we did a little bit of data polling by way of LinkedIn polls, but really wanting to get a sense of, as working parents or even leaders of teams start to see some of those changes coming about, what drives some of the stressors, or how does that become heightened during that back to school season? And some of the top ones that came up, ways that was affecting people in their work, was adapting to new priorities, really that increased mental load, and managing new schedules. And I know recently, and this came out a couple of weeks ago, the US Surgeon General just sharing some of the statistics around parental burnout and stress. And we think about these seasons of transition and how that can impact us in the workplace, that there are some implications to that. So I wanted to start today by really diving into some of those poll results and getting some perspectives on not only what the things are and how they're impacting us, but again, what we can really do with that. So in talking about managing the mental load, Megan or Donnie, it would be helpful to just hear from you in terms of how we define that. What is the mental load?
Yeah, that's a great question, Emily. Megan, do you have thoughts?
Yeah, I do. Do you want to go ahead and start? You want me to take this one?
Sure. Yeah. Just to really simplify it, and Megan, maybe you can build off of this, but the way that I conceptualize a mental load is we all have a mental stage, and there's only so much that we can hold. And our brains really like rhythms and habits. We don't have to think a lot when we know what's coming next. And at the beginning of a transition back into school year, for example, a lot of those rhythms and patterns shift. So now we have to expend some energy trying to figure out how do we do things a little differently, and how do we navigate this year and the challenges that are coming along with this stage of life for kiddos and for us. And so that mental load of that stage can fill up quickly and can cause us to feel overloaded, stressed out. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that metaphor of a stage. One that I often use for myself is envisioning different tabs in your web browser.
Mm.
And so as something like the transition to the school year occurs, several more tabs get added to the list of things that are already operating in your mental browser. And so as we all know, if we have too many tabs open, things are going to start to slow down. Things, are all of those searches and access to information and all of that begins to slow down because we're trying to power too much. And so when I think about mental load, I think that the term actually is a little bit of a a misnomer, because yes, it is cognitive in terms of additional things that we need to think about and make decisions around, but it's also memory and it's also emotion. So
Mhm.
what are all of those things that we need to keep, in our working memory that we didn't used to? Because, as we were just talking today, like, do we have snack? And is this snack appropriate because of the allergies at school? And where's the water bottle? And it's just all of these things that are operating before you even step into your own workday. And so you might step into your workday having 25 tabs, whereas a couple weeks ago, maybe you just had 10. So I think, it's that idea of those additional things getting added onto a plate that's probably already full.
Mhm.
And I like that expanded definition, Megan, that it's not just cognitively, right? Our working memory, the things we're thinking about, but it is. It's an emotional reaction. But I also think physically too, that the browser example made me think of, when our computer slows down, the energy is being drained. And
Mhm.
I actively feel that myself
Mhm.
before even stepping into the workday, given, all of the things, or I was sharing with you all before we hopped on here live, just even getting the email about, theme days at school next week. While as exciting that is in school spirit, the other side of that is, oh no, that's another thing next week. Each morning I need to remember this added thing. So as you think about that, so that's something maybe happening even before our workday. How does that start to then translate into our job performance or even maybe our overall well-being within the workplace?
Mhm.
Yeah, I think part of it, and Donnie, jump in here at any point. I think part of it has to do with this idea of surge capacity. So the idea that, just as humans, as individuals, but
Mm.
also systems, we have a certain amount of resources available to us to manage change, to manage stress, to manage transitions. But those resources are kind of stored to be used in a short-term kind of capacity. Um, and if you think about your schedule, if you're a parent or if you're a leader of a team that has parents, maybe a month ago, things were operating kind of at relatively consistent capacity and pace and things of that nature. The workload might have been high, but it was kind of predictable in terms of how people were engaging. And then you have this huge tidal wave for some people that is the back to school transition. And that capacity is reduced in terms of our ability to incorporate all of the work, all of the interpersonal, all of the client, all of the deadline stuff, now along with this additional mental load that we were just describing. And so when that happens, I think, we're adding in a lot more complexity into the day. We're having to navigate change and expectations, whether it's expectations for ourselves or maybe it's whether it's expectations for our team members. And then I think there's also this incorporation, especially in the workplace, of potentially external pressures. So are there people on the team who are parents and those who are not? And what does that look like in terms of perspective? What does that look like in terms of people's sense of fairness in either way? Like,
Mhm.
oh, this person's going to be late for the next, 4 weeks to this meeting that I have to be on time for. So I think there's all of that that really kind of just adds in two ways to that idea of surge capacity, that we might have already been at it and now we're being asked to do more with the additional mental load. And then that piece about kind of navigating some of those expectations within the workplace. And I think both of those things can have pretty direct impacts on our level of energy, our level of focus, and our level of productivity.
Mhm. Yeah, I love that. It brings up so many different thoughts and ideas about, Megan, like you mentioned, we have a finite amount of energy stepping into the day,
Yeah.
and we have channel capacity.
Mhm.
And, you know, as we step into change, like a going back to school type change, we can burn through a lot of energy before we even get out the door, just trying to get things organized. And again, you know, we're out of system, we're out of our rhythm. And, you know, kiddos from time to time don't like to cooperate at, you know, 7 o'clock in the morning and put their socks and shoes on and eat their breakfast and do all the things. And so I think that there's that component. But then you also mentioned, you know, on a team, if folks have kiddos, there are other folks who don't, this idea of fairness comes into play. And that can really be a really big energy drain when we feel like things aren't fair because of, you know, an outside variable. And so that can cause an energy drain, maybe for both groups, parents and folks who don't have kids. And so it, you know, at all these little systemic levels, energy is being impacted as we go through these major shifts. I remember before I had kiddos, I would be driving to work and all of a sudden I would hit traffic, usually right around Labor Day, right after Labor Day. I'd be, oh, school's back in session. Traffic is terrible. And, you know, not having kids at that point, that took some energy for me because, you know, now I'm going to be late for my day. I have to adjust my schedule and my rhythms. And so, yeah, I think it's important to highlight that all these dynamics come with the shifts as we head into a new school year. Yeah.
Another thing that the two of you are talking about is this idea of expectations, whether that's on ourselves or others, perceived expectations or known expectations. You know, Megan, you mentioned a little bit around communication. I wonder how communication might help in those ways to perhaps alleviate some of those unstated expectations, or Donnie, as you're describing, maybe that perceived lack of fairness. Oh, Megan,
Megan?
you're,
Hi, I'm
there we
back.
go.
There we go.
Here we are. Part of the mental load. I forget to hit unmute. I think that communication in this context, as well as so many others, is part of the key, part of the solution, and also probably part of the challenge. As it relates to parents, I think part of the communication piece is having a conversation with yourself. What we know is a key piece to building and maintaining resilience is an ability to define and accept reality. And unless we pause and pull over and say, okay, you know what, for the next 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks, maybe 5 weeks, I'm going to need to have some different expectations of myself because my mental load is going to be greater. I'm going to need to maybe ask for some flexibility of my teammates, of my coworkers. But I'm not going to be able to do that. I'm not going to be able to communicate proactively with others who might benefit from understanding how many tabs I have open in my browser, not as an excuse, but as a way of saying, here is what's going on. Here's what you can expect from me, and here's what's going to need to be put on hold for the next couple of weeks, but here's my plan to get back to it whenever. So I think that conversation with yourself has to happen first so that then you can be as proactive as possible in communicating those things to others. In the absence of our own acceptance of the reality that is maybe a more chaotic change to our schedule, we're going to be less able or less aware of potentially the need to do that. So that's one thought.
I love that idea of just starting. I mean, that's kind of where we always go, but starting with ourselves.
Yeah.
because, and being intentional about, that self-talk and figuring out how we're going to communicate this outward, so that other people can have an understanding of where we are. And that takes some self-awareness and some intentionality to figure out, where are we? What do
Yeah.
we really need here? What is
Right.
going on?
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great.
I think, Megan, your response was helpful just too in terms of that timeline. It's not like, okay, we're back in school and there's this new schedule. Yep. Okay, it's just gonna flip a switch. I'm good to go. Giving yourself that grace, and that, it might be 2 weeks for some, it might be 4 or 5 weeks for some, to really allow some of that self-awareness and that transition to occur.
Yeah.
It's not going to be forever,
Right.
hopefully.
Right.
But to think about what that may look like. And I think part of that too might even be stepping back to calibrate, what happened over the summer. And sometimes even as we get into a new routine, there are things that might pop up from, previous seasons or months, that might also impact kind of how we're thinking about or processing that transition.
Yeah, Emily, it brings to mind what you and I were talking about earlier about a team that we're working with, where they, in envisioning the upcoming transition to the school year and knowing that that might create some changes in team members' schedules, it was the consideration of, hey, this is what our meeting schedule looks like right now. Do we want to shift things a little bit to allow a little bit more buffer time for people in the morning? So that is helping to try to create a sense of fairness, a sense of equity, because that decision to shift the meeting time would potentially not only benefit parents who are trying to get into that new morning routine, but for people who don't have kids or young kids that they're responsible for, getting to school or getting on the bus, they're not going to be sitting at that meeting on time, waiting for other team members to come. And so if we all agree, hey, yeah, let's just jump that back a half an hour or an hour, so people aren't, firing in out of breath and, stressed from trying to do all the morning things, and we can engage with the right mindset when we step into the meeting as a team. So that, even that kind of proactive piece is, hey, let's look at this next month or this next quarter. What do we anticipate might be some challenges to our regular rhythm? And can we as a team kind of proactively consider and make some changes before those things become problems?
Yeah. Yeah, curious, in maybe our last question of this session, what might be some of those, supports or resources that individuals, things we can do, but teams or leaders can really put in place to help foster that effectiveness through this season of transition? I think, as you're describing, Megan, even just talking about some of our meeting rhythms, what makes sense, could be a great avenue. Curious if there's other thoughts or perspectives.
Well, I think, Emily, going back to the, starting with ourselves, I've worked with parents in the past, and a common theme is, we try to make these things happen, keep everybody on schedule in the morning, and we can't do it, so we just give up. And so I think coming back to the communication piece, how do I want to communicate to myself around this? Is it really hopeless, or can I figure out a way through this? And then taking a little time, again, maybe pulling over, maybe the night before, and trying to figure out, how am I going to communicate what I need to happen tomorrow morning? And maybe I communicate that with my kids tonight. And I think it was J. Edgar Hoover who said, plans are pretty worthless, but planning is essential. So, things don't always go according to plan, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't plan or that you're doing it wrong. It just means life is variable. And so taking that time and then helping to set that pattern, so there's some consistency, a rhythm, like we talked about before. Like, our brains love rhythms and patterns. That way we know what's coming. There's no surprises. And so there's less pushback from ourselves, from our kids, from team members. Megan, like you were talking about, I mean, having this conversation can not only provide more of a sense of fairness, but it also provides the opportunity for autonomy and input. to say,
Yep.
oh yeah, okay, we can move our meetings to 10, rather than saying,
Yeah.
we got a lot of parents on the team, we're moving this meeting to 10 o'clock. And
Right.
so rearrange your schedules accordingly. That doesn't
Mhm.
feel good
Mhm.
on a number of different levels. So I think, trying to find the rhythms that work for you, staying open with your communication, and staying open to this idea that, you know, having a game plan going into the next day can be really, really helpful to set everybody up for success.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. I echo and agree with all of those strategies and approaches. And I think just reflecting back on, to our model of centered leadership, I think this is yet another place where it invites the opportunity to practice centering. So whether it's on the days that people are driving into the office, if you're in a hybrid schedule and you run into really bad traffic, it is our opportunity and our responsibility, especially if we're in a leadership role, to pull over and reset and regulate ourselves before we step into an environment where we're impacting and influencing other people. And so I think, in just the way that those kinds of things in our morning routine can interrupt us as parents, if you're experiencing more, kind of stress or dysregulation as a part of your morning routine, as you're trying to shake things out and get everybody out the door, what can you do to pull over, to center, to reset before you step into your work environment where you might be, and likely are, going to be impacting other people? So I think it's just a really helpful reminder about just that powerful pause that we can all take. And if you're working with somebody who is a parent, and doing that for yourself, just to practice pause, can you step in curious rather than judgmental? Can you step in empathic, rather than irritated, as much as we can, to try to help to maintain that really more productive, human-centered workplace.
Yeah. And I think it's a great reminder, coming back to our centered leadership model, that the goal isn't always to be in center or out of range. There's going to be things throughout the course of the day, getting a text from the school or an email about something, that are going to come up. It's that ability to, can we get back to that center more quickly and in a way that's intentional, so that it isn't disruptive to our communication, our connections, or the environment that we're a part of.
Yep.
We'll certainly want to thank the two of you for some of your thoughts and perspectives, and for everyone joining us here today. We just want to share some upcoming things that we at the Lumen Group have going on, and ways that you can join us. While typically we do this virtually, we are hosting a special showcase event for HR leaders in the Twin Cities, that you can really spend some time with us, getting to know our centered leadership model and some of the work that we're doing, and are really excited to present and facilitate live in person with those. So if you are in the Twin Cities and are curious, we have information on our LinkedIn page. You can also scan this QR code, and we'd be happy to chat if you have any additional questions. We will also be holding our next Illuminated conversation in October 11th. And October 10th is World Mental Health Day. So we're going to spend time in our Illuminated conversation on the 11th talking about how things like stress management, team resilience, really do foster our mental well-being in the workplace. So the things that we can do as individuals, as leaders, as organizational change makers, to really help support the well-being of our people, our most valuable assets in business, the people that are there day in and day out. So again, you can scan the QR code. We'll bring you to that information and the opportunity to register for our upcoming session. But as always, we so appreciate you being here. And come join again. We'd love to have you and your perspective recognized as we talk about these important topics related to workplace stress and the things that can disrupt us, or really build effective, engaged teams together. So I hope you all have a great rest of your Friday, and take care.
Well,
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.